let's talk about statements and blocks. Well, we've already taken a look at statements and blocks throughout the training, but I just want to define what they are. This is a block. So if we had multiple statements here within this block, then we're going to have multiple statements of execution within a block of code. So a block is anything within the brackets. So this can be your for loops, your classes, your methods. Anything within these brackets is going to be a block, and it's going to be executed when this particular statement is called. So this statement comes through after we enter our main entry point, and then you can see that we're going to check this statement to see if this condition is going to be valid. We're going to start with a for loop from the fact that I is equal to 0. We're going to continue as long as I is less than 1,000, and we'll increment I by 1. We'll see for loops later. But as long as you can keep doing this, it's going to execute these statements over and over again, going to the end of the block, dropping off, coming back to the top, dropping off, etc., etc., etc. Now, if we were to put a variable here, and then we were to reference this outside here, we can't do that. We'll see more of this when we're talking about scope, but this is going to only be available for working within this block of code. See, it's initialized here, and when this is ending here, it's gone. It's no longer here. It's no longer in memory. It comes off of the stack. So we'll get rid of that. So these are statements. Anything here is a statement. Statement, statement, statement. You can have multiple statements on one line if you want to, as we have here. Each statement is going to get executed individually, even though they're on one line. You can also do the same thing if you're working with your structures or enums. You can put everything on one line if you wanted to. Even your classes, you can stuff it on one line. It's not going to be very readable, but that semicolon indicates the end of a statement, the end of that line. So that's pretty much what you're going to be doing when you're working with your statements and your blocks. So if we look at this block of code here, this block of code is only going to execute when this method is called. As you can see later on, we actually create a new class down here, and then we actually call this method from our class variable here, and we pass in the value 2. We are only going to be able to execute these statements when we actually call that, and then pass in a variable, and then line by line, this is going to get executed. This if condition is just going to test to see if this is going to be true or false. Is x greater than or equal to 0? Well, if it's true, then we're going to go to x. Go to is a nice feature within C#. It is more or less coming from the Visual Basic world. You can also do this within C. Other languages support this as well. This is really there to help you out to make your coding simple, that you don't have to create complex logic just to get something to work. So a go-to statement might come in handy. So this is just demonstrating that we're creating what is called a label here. And this label can be the same name as any variable that you're using, but it's going to sit differently. It's going to be in a list of labels, and you can't confuse that with your variables, because you can have this happen that they're the same if you wanted to. Now when we have a block of code, normally we just end the block of code and come out and return where we were. So if we execute this method, we're going to stop further processing the lines here, and we're going to process each individual line here. When we're done, we're going to come out and go back to this point and continue working. That's what's going to happen when we run our programs. Now, what we do here with this go-to statement, if this condition is met, then we're going to go to x. We're going to skip this line and go right to x. And what x does is it returns a value. And the return value is specified because we have a return value here. Remember, I was talking about void and how that's different. Void doesn't return anything, like our main routine here. But this is going to return an int, so we have to specify a return condition. So if this is met, then it's going to just jump here, and then this is going to execute. Now, if you don't have this value here, if this is not true, then it's going to execute the next line without doing the goto, and then eventually it's going to do a return. But it's still labeled, but it's still going to do the return. It's just labeled, that's all. So it's just going to follow in the processing here. It just labels this statement. And it just goes to that point. So there could be additional lines as well. So that's pretty much statements and blocks. We'll see a lot more later just to formalize it, give you all the information about what you're actually doing there so you can understand a little bit better. and we can just continue with the training.